Okay, Chair, we're now live if you'd like to make a start.
Right, thank you, Chris. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Planning and Development Committee. Can I remind all participants that normal rules of procedure apply? For example, comments, questions need to be directed through the Chair. As we are meeting virtually, proceedings may take slightly longer than normal, so your patience would be appreciated. As per our normal virtual meeting procedures, if questions have been received prior to the meeting, I will call on a relevant member at the appropriate time to raise that question. If you are invited to speak, please state your name, be as specific as possible about which issue it is you're speaking about. Members of the public can view this via YouTube Live, but they will not be able to actively participate or comment. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this. Any agents, applicants or objectors that wish to speak on a particular application have had the opportunity to inform the Planning Department in advance of today's meeting. I will invite those individuals to present their cases at the appropriate time in proceedings. With holding the meeting remotely to reduce the likelihood of technical issues, these individuals have been asked to dial into the meeting via telephone. Please be advised there will be a time limit of 5 minutes for those who wish to speak in support of an application and 5 minutes for those who wish to speak in objection. For example, if more than one person wishes to speak, the time allocation of 5 minutes will be divided between those two speakers. There may be also ward councillors in attendance who wish to speak. I'm the chair of the committee today. My name is Councillor John Hobson. Also in attendance we have Paul Clark and Andy Glossop from Planning, Simon Thompson from Highways, Emma Loughran from Legal, Chris Lunn and Georgina Moore from Democratic Services. The other individuals that you can see in attendance are councillors who are members of this committee, and they will be making the decisions at today's meeting. Item Agenda 2. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillors Janet Thompson and Mary Nugent.
Thank you very much. Item Agenda 3. Do we have any declarations of interest from members of the committee in respect of the items scheduled for today's meeting?
I've got two, Chair. For Brampton Thorntree, Roth Road and Cinderwood.
Councillor Branson, you have one?
I think I should, yes, I think I should just mention the fact that I was involved in the campaign to get a crossing of Brasscastle Lane, which is adjacent to the planning development, and therefore I'm concerned to ensure that whatever is decided doesn't impact on that junction and make things worse.
Thank you, David. Now, I too have to declare an interest because it is in my ward. Right, we're now up to item 3. We've done item 3, we're now up to item 4, which is, I've got how many papers here? The minutes of the last meeting. Can somebody confirm that they were a true record of the last meeting?
Yeah, I'd confirm that, Chair, thank you.
You have a seconder, Caroline?
No,
Right, agenda item 5. The schedule of remaining planning applications to be considered by committee. Well, we only have one application on today, which is Ford Close Riding School in Brasscastle Lane. So before I hand over to Andy to present the details of the application, Andy will be sharing his PowerPoint slides for each application on the screen. This will limit my view of members during his presentation. So can I ask all committee members refrain from asking questions until Andy has stopped sharing his screen? And if any members have questions for Andy in light of the information that he will be presenting, please can you raise your hand and I will invite you to speak in turn after Andy has finished. So Andy, over to you. Could you share your screen, please?
Thanks, Chair. It's Paul. I'm actually presenting today, so I'll start sharing my screen now. If I may. Can members see that okay?
Yes, we can. Well, I can.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Chair. The application before you today, as you've identified, is for demolition of existing buildings and the erection of 69 dwellings, including 19 bungalows with open space infrastructure on land at Ford Close Riding Centre off of Brasscastle Lane. Well, I've read the report before them. I intend to approach this presentation in the following way, by identifying the site, the proposals, a quick overview of the consultations. I think one element of this will be set in the policy context, from which there will be identified two key issues which we need to look at. First of these being design of the development, second, the infrastructure in the area which can support that development. I'll then look at what other issues there are to be raised during the consultation process before summing up in terms of conclusions. As already stated, the applications for 69 dwellings, including 19 bungalows. The site is 5.5 hectares. It's to the south of Brasscastle Lane, between the existing Great House housing development and the Eagle Park site to the north, as can be seen on the slide for members. So it is 5.5 hectares, primarily open fields with some hedgerows and mature woodland. There's mature woodland outside the site to the south, to the east and to the southwest. Mature woodland within the site, roughly where my mouse is at the moment. There are also some buildings on the site. These will be demolished. These are the existing riding school buildings. And in the far southeast corner of the site, there is also a telecommunication mast. The scheme itself, the 69 dwellings comprise of 11 two-bed bungalows, 8 three-bed bungalows, 40 four-bed houses, and 10 five-bed houses. In terms of consultation, the council sent out 51 neighbour consultation letters. The locations they were sent to are shown on the plan on the screen at the moment. We received a total of 35 objections. 25 were received from individual residences or individual properties. As the plan shows, there was only 4 of those people we consulted objected to the scheme. Majority of objections came from further afield. What I'm not proposing to do at this stage, Chair, is go into any detail in those objections. I will pick the presentation, other than to say that the key issues raised were that the proposal is in conflict with planning policy. There's inadequate infrastructure to deal with the scheme. There should be a predominance of bungalows as part of the scheme, the traffic impacts, and the impacts upon the green areas and wildlife. I think at the heart of the assessment and consideration of this application is the planning policy context. In particular, I want to draw members' attention to 3 policies. These are policy H30 of the Housing Local Plan, which allocates the site for housing and sets the site-specific criteria for its development. Policy H1 of the Housing Local Plan, which sets the spatial strategy for the plan. And policy MW4 of the Martin West Local Plan. Before I turn to these policies in more detail, it's probably important to stress that the principle of residential development has been established through the allocation of the site in the adopted local plan, and is also recognised in the Martin West Neighbourhood Plan. So what members should not take into consideration is the acceptability of housing on the site, but instead should focus on compliance with the policy framework as it applies to the site. Turning to the first of these policies, policy H30, which allocates the site for housing. As members will see, the policy states plan permission will be granted for a high quality, high value executive residential development to provide a maximum of 50 dwellings and associated access improvements. Development proposals will be expected to provide a residential development that reflects the executive housing types within the surrounding area, take account of the topography and features of the site in the design process, retain and integrate existing mature trees and hedgerows where possible, including the retention of existing woodland buffers along identified watercourses, provide any necessary off-site improvements to transport infrastructure, ensure traffic generated by the development does not have a significant detrimental impact on the highway network, provide 15% affordable housing either on-site or off-site financial contribution, provide off-site improvements to school provision, and provide pedestrian and cycleway links along the eastern boundary of the site to improve connectivity with adjoining residential areas to the north and south. As members will see, I've highlighted there in the policy a key element, and that is that the development should be for a maximum of 50 dwellings. This is a point stressed in numerous objections that we have received to the proposal. I stress this because the proposal needs to be considered in the context of all the policies of the development plan, and in which I'll now turn to policy H1, the spatial strategy of the local plan. I've not included the whole policy here, Chair. I've only included the appropriate extract, and that states that all housing requirements and housing allocations in the core strategy and housing development plan document are minimum figures unless otherwise stated. Proposals for fewer than the minimum or more than the maximum dwelling requirements for a site will only be considered where it can be clearly demonstrated through a design-led approach having regard to the characteristics of the surrounding area and any site-specific policy requirements that an alternative capacity is more appropriate. This wording was included in the plan at the request of the planning inspector to ensure that the plan was sound and capable of adoption by the council. Seeks to ensure that the council doesn't seek to restrict unnecessarily the supply of housing, but it does include the important caveat to enable the council to control release of sites. The importance of this section is it does allow for sites to come forward with more dwellings than allocated, provided that it is considered by members that the proposal is of a sufficiently high design quality and meets all other site-specific policy requirements. Key consideration for members, therefore, that today, I believe, is that does the scheme, by exceeding the requirement of 50 dwellings, undermine the design quality that we're trying to achieve on this site? Is the design of this scheme sufficient to outweigh the need for maximum 50 units? The final policy that I will refer to is the Martin West MW4 from the Martin West Neighbourhood Plan. This policy states proposals for a high-quality residential development at Ford Riding School will be supported when an element of the dwellings provided should be bungalows. Subject to negotiation, a proportion of the developer contributions should be towards traffic calming measures within the vicinity, and a donation made for the upkeep of Bonnie Grove Park, Sudbury Pond, and Fairy Dale. Again, the importance of high quality is stressed within this policy, but importantly, this policy also makes reference to the need for an element of bungalows. This is important because this is quite distinct from a number of objections which are saying that there should either be a predominance of bungalows or that 40% of the dwelling should be bungalows. This is clearly not the policy position. It is true that supporting text makes reference to an aspirational target of 40%, but this is both aspirational and does not form part of the policy. The proposal by providing 19 bungalows at approximately a third of the number of dwellings is both substantial and in accordance with these policy requirements. From the policy position, it is therefore clear that the principal consideration for members is one of design. Has exceeding the policy requirement of 50 dwellings undermined design objectives of the site? So what I'll do now is I'll turn to the first of these issues, design. And it takes two parts. It's the urban design, how the properties relate to each other, how they relate to the surrounding area, how it integrates with the area, the relationship with the open spaces, the street scene, the quality of place it's created. And the second issue is the design of the buildings themselves. What you can see on this slide, Chair, is the yellow arrow is where the access point to the development will be up at Brasscastle Lane. And the blue line shows the building line. There will be no building in front of that. It will be behind the mature tree belt, behind the hedgerows in Brasscastle Lane. What this will help do is to help retain and maintain as much as is possible to do so the rural and open nature of Brasscastle Lane. In terms of the scheme, as we can see, there are a number of points regarding this. There is at the front of the site, there is a significant element of open space, green space, and a substantial suds pond detention basin, which will be planted, I believe, with wildflower meadow seeds. There's a number of public rights of right-of-ways within and adjacent to the site, which integrated with the surrounding woodland to the south, to the north. Potentially, probably importantly, is that the main footpath to the north-south doesn't follow the Brasscastle Lane. It actually goes internal to the site and comes out to the north near where the gas governor is. So therefore, keeping the footpath separate from the Brasscastle Lane. The site actually responds quite well to natural features, the woodland. It maximises the relationship with the open space within the development. It includes natural surveillance all over all open spaces. There's some prominent dwelling buildings within the scheme, key buildings, corner turns at prominent locations, enhancing the street view. One of the key issues facing the site is the mast in the far southeast corner. I will come on to that in a bit. What these next few slides show is extracts from that main proposal, so that members can actually see in a bit more detail some of the site issues and how the development relates to the surrounding area and how it creates the sense of character, the sense of place, and enhances the overall value of the scheme. As you can see from the south, the plan on the left of the screen there, Chair, you have the suds basin, the entrance off the Brasscastle Lane. It does cut through the woodland slightly, but there is enhanced planting as part of this as well. Gateway feature, properties overlooking the open space to create surveillance. I should also add that the bungalows interspersed within the development, creating a variety of house types and streetscape to add to the value of the appearance and character of the area. One of the key issues already raised is the proximity of the mast in the southern corner. That is a significant constraint to the development of the site, and is something which, admittedly, it is difficult to incorporate satisfactorily. This is being dealt with as best possible. The properties in that location are orientated so that the mast doesn't dominate, and this will also be achieved through the use of some of the boundary treatments regarding those properties as well. Turning to the issue of house types, there's a good variety of house types. There's 11 types of property, varying from 2, 3, 4 and 5 beds. The 2 and 3 bed units are the bungalows. These are shown on the screen at the moment. The 2 bed is the uppermost property there, the 3 bed, the lower one. The remaining properties are 4 and 5 bed detached. They will feature a variety of design details, including gable features, soffit, decorative porches, stepped elevations, windows in eaves, bay windows, etc. To help maintain the quality of development, it's proposed to remove a number of permitted development rights from the scheme. These include removing the means of enclosure, the ability to extend and alter the properties, the ability to convert garages into habitable spaces, and the ability to put hard standing in front of properties. They will all be removed as part of the permitted development. The next slide shows a CGI of the proposed development. This view, if I can take you back, Chair, is this slide here. It's here. So it's looking back from the suds basins back towards these 3 properties. So that's it's a computer generated image of those properties. The properties themselves, one of the policy requirements is that they're of a similar executive nature to other properties in the location. These are of a similar scale to the properties at Grey Towers Farm adjacent to this site. And in fact, this scheme is at a slightly lower density than Grey Towers Farm. I believe this comes in at roughly about 18 dwellings per hectare, where Grey Towers Farm's around about 19. So they are very similar in terms of densities and characters from that respect. The next slide, series of slides, shows the roads network around the site. This slide, the image in the bottom left-hand of your screen shows you approximately where the main photograph is taken from. This is a view from along Brascastle Lane, looking back towards Eagle Park. The site is to the left. Roughly where this photograph image is taken will be, I believe, where improvements were made to the bus stops to facilitate the development. The public right-of-way access and site, which will be in turn inside the site, will come in roughly around about where my mouse is at the moment. So it will come into there at Brascastle Lane behind the hedgerows. This slide is taken from the access point into the site, looking north, back towards the Gas Governor, back towards Eagle Park. Again, there is no intention of putting footways down either side. It will be behind the hedge to the right of the screen. In essence, trying to retain the rural character of that road. There will be a need to put road lighting, street lighting down there because of the 30 mile an hour nature which will be introduced on that road. So there will be more elements of street lighting introduced. And looking from the access way heading south, the 30, 60 mile an hour limit signs will be moved about approximately 45, 50 metres south, taking out further the 30 mile an hour speed limit, and they will be replaced by a new gateway feature, the change in speed limit, which will consist of signage, lining, and a welcome sign, which will help reinforce the change in speed limit, try and influence driver behaviour. What I'd like to turn to now is the key issue of infrastructure. I know this is both a key concern of the objections that we received, and I know this is something at the heart of members' considerations when they are looking at planning applications. Can the existing infrastructure in the surrounding area cope with the proposed development? Or if it can't, is there any mitigation which is being proposed which can actually enable the development to come forward? As part of this scheme, there are 15% of the affordable housing requirements all being provided on site. That is being provided by 11 of the bungalows. So that is being met. In addition, there is a contribution being made in accordance with the Martin West Neighbourhood Plan towards the upkeep and enhancement of Bonnie Grove Park, Sudbury Point and Fairydale. And there's also a significant contribution towards Martin West Beck improvements as part of flood mitigation and drainage improvements as part of that Beck corridor network. Perhaps most importantly, we're seeking a sizable contribution towards highways improvements. These go towards the strategic highways network improvements to wider area to help deliver the housing allocations in the local plan. But also as part of this, we are looking at implementing the junction improvements between Dixon's Bank and Brascastle Lane by introducing a further signalised arm onto Brascastle Lane at that junction. And as part of that as well, there will be pedestrian crossing improvements as well to Dixon's Bank. And this will be linked to this scheme via the Section 106 improvements, so the two will be linked. In addition, we are looking at so I've already mentioned the upgrading of adjacent inbound and outbound bus stops on Brascastle at the northern part of the site. Provision of a formal pedestrian crossing between the housing to the north of Brascastle Lane and the northern site frontage. We're looking at provision of a footway linking the new crossing point to the proposed site access junction. And as I've already mentioned, the gateway traffic calming feature in Brascastle Lane itself. What members will notice is that the policy does make mention regarding education contribution. There is no education contribution being sought. The reason behind that is that when colleagues in education were consulted on the application, it did not identify a requirement, and as such, we can't ask for one as part of this application. There's some other issues which have been raised during the consultation responses, which I like to pick up now, one of which has been the 5-year land supply. It's been made mention that we've got an excessive 5-year land supply, approximately equivalent to 7 years. I believe there's a misconception regarding the role of the 5-year land supply. It is something which is not there to be used to restrict development, particularly development on allocated sites. It is there as a tool that if we aren't delivering sites, then it's used as a tool to virtually knock us over the head with, saying that to make it hard for us to resist development. Where a site, particularly an allocated site, is acceptable in planning terms, the 5-year land supply can't be used as a reason for refusal. This site does actually form part of the 5-year land supply, so it is within that equation anyway. Perhaps the main purpose of a 5-year land supply is actually to assist with determining whether the local plan is up to date or not. One of the issues which has been raised in the representations is that the local plan was adopted in 2014. It's now 6 years old, and as such, little weight could be attached to it because it should be considered to be out of date. The main means of assessing that will be the 5-year land supply. The fact that we do have access in 5 years shows that the plan is still up to date, and we can still use that as a basis for determining applications. If we didn't have a 5-year land supply and the local plan wasn't therefore considered to be up to date, it then falls to the NPPF for us to consider the applications against. A number of objectors have said that the proposal is contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework. This isn't the case. In fact, if we had to consider the application against the NPPF, we will probably be looking at far more dwellings, because key elements of that proposal actually say that we need to look at the most effective use of land, and that we shouldn't necessarily be looking to refuse applications where they fail to make efficient use of land. And so therefore it might be considered in the context that the density of the scheme may be considered to be too low in the context of the NPPF. Other issues which have been raised include archaeology. Members will see that one of the conditions that we are proposing to place on the application is a condition for an archaeological study to be carried out during the works, and a watching brief to be maintained to identify if there are any archaeological remains. A further impact objection, it was regarding the impact on ecology and wildlife. The site at the moment does not have a significant amount of ecological interest. There has been an ecological study submitted as part of the application. Hedgerows will be enhanced. There's additional wildlife planting, additional planting and landscaping, which should help to enhance the ecological value of the site. And I think, finally, Chair, how I'd like to conclude this is that I feel that there is a finely balanced set of arguments on this. Officers have extended considerable efforts to negotiate a scheme with the applicant to a level where they feel they've got it to a position where they can support it. But the main issues that we need to consider, or have taken into consideration, is the design and development of a high enough quality for us to justify exceeding the maximum number of dwellings specified in policy H30 of the local plan. If not, then why not? And also, if it is acceptable in design terms, is the infrastructure provision, including proposed mitigation, sufficient to accommodate the level of development? If not, then why not? And finally, does the inclusion of a significant number of bungalows, does that in itself provide justification for a scheme which was requires or and that allow us to set aside some of those design parameters? So I say, Chair, it is a finely, as far as I'm concerned, it is a finely balanced argument. As a consequence of that, we have come down on the side that we feel that we can support the application, albeit to a Section 106 agreement identifying the issues we've highlighted in this report and this presentation, and also the extensive conditions identified in the report, which relate to the restrictions upon any amendments to the design of the scheme, and also regarding landscaping and woodland and management issues on site. At that note, Chair, I'll stop sharing my screen and open it to any questions.
Thank you, Paul. I'm sure we all enjoyed that. Does anybody have any questions for Paul? Councillor Coop.
Thank you, Chair. As I often do, I always come back to shops and amenities as part of infrastructure. The nearest shops to this place is either the other railway crossing at Nunthorpe or the shops at Marton or Colby, which is a long way to go, which will mean that people have to go there by car. I don't think the bus service is very good there. So it's adding more and more and more to the roads, which is not a good idea. There's no local community, etc. I know that might not be a total consideration, but it's something that I would mention. My main objection to this, listening to that, would be on design grounds, because you can quote the Martin West planners, we no doubt will, but it says 50 and there's 69. You've got 19 extra properties in there, and I would question that's not meant to be 19 extra properties. They're meant to be included into that. So I just would put that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. If I just come back on those points before we move to the next one, if I may, Chair, if that's acceptable. The first one, in terms of shop retail facilities, I'm fully aware of members' views on shop facilities, local facilities within developments. The issue regarding this scheme is that one is an allocation which doesn't make a requirement for a retail facility within the scheme. And the second issue is that it is probably, given the nature of the scheme that we are proposing in policy terms for this site, relatively small scale allocation for 50, proposal before us for 69, and the nature of the development we're proposing as part of this, in terms of the low density, high value, is that potentially it doesn't lend itself to a shop facility being provided within such a scheme. We are providing improved pedestrian access as part of this to help encourage walking. Unfortunately, it is a fact that some of these allocations, you will not have access to local facilities such as that in the immediate surroundings. The other issue about the design, you're absolutely correct there, Councillor Coop, is that the key issue here, as far as officers are concerned, is the design, and it is, do those 19 dwellings, in addition to the 50 being allocated, is the design being watered down? If members feel that design is being watered down by this, we really need to know in what ways that members feel that design is unacceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Branson, you wish to speak, sir?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned briefly about the crossings that were going to be added in this scheme. Unfortunately, you went a bit too fast. Could you possibly just clarify what pedestrian crossings are going to be provided in this area? Thank you.
Probably best, Chair, if I ask Mr. Thompson to answer that question, being our highways expert. He probably knows a bit more about where they will be.
Very well, very well. Can you come in, Simon, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'll just flick from screen to screen here so to try to describe it.
Simon, you muted yourself.
Hello. So we're going to reinstate, or it's proposed to reinstate, the northern access into the gas governor to full height curb, and the footway will then continue along Brasscastle Lane and round to the southern entrance into the gas governor site. So that connects the site into existing infrastructure. Where that northern vehicle access is, that's where drop crossing and tactile paving will be provided. So that's where your crossing point will be. At the junction of, well, it's difficult, I suppose, at Eagle Park, Brasscastle Lane, that junction there. There's also drop curbs and tactile paving proposed there as well. So we've got east-west connections and north-south connections.
Thank you, Simon. Does that answer your question, Councillor Branson, or do you want to?
Not totally. I mean,
No,
you're aware that there is a pedestrian crossing there, of course, across Brasscastle Lane. I'm just, you talked about crossings. They're not pedestrian crossings, are they? They're just road markings, aren't they?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I was looking at pedestrian crossings. So maybe I misunderstood. Have we any more pedestrian crossings been put in place?
Yeah, I mean, is it possible if I can share my screen and then
Of course it is. Of course it is,
Yeah.
Simon.
Yeah.
We
Okay,
need to
thank
know
you.
what's going on.
Yeah. So I'll just start sharing there. So we've got there. That is the proposed highway works there. I don't know. Can you all see that clearly?
Yes.
I can zoom in a little bit. So this is where the vehicle access, which is that northern access into the gas governor, is going to be removed. So that's where we'll get the drop curbs and the tactile paving. So that's where we've got a crossing point for pedestrians there. And then we've got the same arrangement here. So we've got another crossing point for pedestrians being proposed there. And then this is where it comes through, heading south, and then integrates to the internal site layout. Your bus stops are proposed or will be delivered here as part of those highway works. So the bus stops are connected into these pedestrian routes. Does that clarify?
It does a little bit, but I'm assuming that none of these are pedestrian crossings. Of course, they're just road marking.
Just road marking.
But the technical term, they're uncontrolled pedestrian crossings. They are pedestrian crossings. If your question's relating to are they going to be controlled in the form of, like, say, a zebra crossing or a signalised?
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to take the form of a signalised controlled crossing.
No. You're right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything to ask Paul before we go on? Right, well, I do. Paul, can you go back to sharing your screen, please? Can you show me the mast? Can members see exactly where the mast is?
Bear with me, Chair. I'll just pull that up. Right, can you see that screen? Right, just get it back. Right, there are a number, Chair, there are a number of images relating to it. There's
That'll do. That'll do.
that one. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The mast
Is
is
that
in
the
this
mast?
general location there.
Right. Can all the members see that? Can they see where the mast actually is? Right. Okay. Thank you. Can you then show me the access point onto Brascastle Lane?
Certainly, Chair. Will that do, or do you want something?
No, that'll do. That'll do fine.
The access point there.
Right. Now, it actually, where it says proposed site layout on the right hand side of your picture, it shows the access point going through the middle of the wood.
It does.
So we'll obviously have to cut trees down to go through there.
There will be some trees cut down as part of that.
Right. That's this point, despite the fact that the mayor has asked if we'll plant more trees in Middlesbrough, you were going to cut them down to go through. Why couldn't the application go around the wood?
I would have to defer to colleagues in highways terms potentially.
Okay.
Of that. But certainly, whilst there will be trees cut down, there will be replacement trees as part of the scheme as well.
Right. Okay. Then one of the other things you said in your presentation, which went on for quite a while actually, rather surprised me, but you said that the Grey Towers Farm, this development is a sort of copy of the Grey Towers Farm application. Mm-hmm. Well, the design of the Grey Towers Farm application for me isn't very good because, as you know, they're having difficulty in actually selling those properties. So if this is going to be the same, I'm not over happy about that. But okay, that's fair enough. Does anybody else have any questions to ask Paul?
Just one, Chair. The 4 and 5 bedroom houses, do we actually need 4 and 5 bedroom houses up there? From Screen from crossing the town centre or around the estates? Do we actually need them? I would have thought affordable, rentable 4 and 5 bedroom houses would be more applicable.
We can't. That's a market decision in terms of 4 or 5 bed. The policy sets out the requirement for executive houses, executive style houses, similar to those in the surrounding area. as I've said, the presentation, the key issue for members is to decide whether what's before you in design terms, in reality, is acceptable or not, or whether there is a watering down, which is to an unacceptable level, which makes the scheme unacceptable in your viewpoint.
Thanks, Bob.
Anybody else? Simon, I think, have you got your hand up, Simon? I can't see the. Sorry, Simon.
Sorry, Chair. Just
That's okay.
I was just looking there in terms of the access. I think what has been shown there in terms of coming through that tree belt. Officers, highways officers. Surprisingly, we see that as an issue. And what we've done, I think, what you're seeing in the plans there is a worst case scenario. Through design measures, we can introduce a pinch point there and a footway potentially only on one side because we have got a crossing facility. So if members felt there was an issue, we could reduce the width of that access running through the trees, and I'd estimate by in the region of 4 metres to further minimise any impact.
Yeah, it was just the impact of losing trees. I don't want to see trees cut down if they don't have to be cut down, and to me that was a silly place to put an access point in, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. We're also we're also limited regards to other constraints. Obviously, we've got the junction to the north, and then achieving suitable sight lines, and the access as proposed does meet all technical guidance in terms of sight lines and junction spacing.
On my screen again.
Yes, you can, Paul.
Right, if you can see the layout plan there, the bungalows which have got the blue stars in are, I believe, the the affordable units. So you've got 5 down in the corner near the mast. You've got another 4 up in the northeastern corner, and another 2 in the middle of the estate. So they're spread throughout the estate. They are the 2-bed bungalows within the scheme, are the affordable units.
Thank you, Paul. Does that help, Councillor Garvey?
Yeah, it helps with the plan. Is that what we're calling affordable housing? Bungalows, 2-bedroom bungalows. That's what we call affordable housing.
In terms of this scheme, yes, it's they will obviously, as part of the legal agreement, Section 106 agreement, there will be a discussion in terms of what format they are provided and offered. The National Planning Policy Framework offers a number of different potential scenarios in terms of how that affordable housing can be delivered. Obviously, that is up for discussion as part of the 106 agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Platt, you had your hand up. You left it unmuted, Jim.
Yeah, sorry, I'm with Councillor Cook, but there's no facilities for any shops. There's lots and lots of houses there, and the nearest shops to my mind is Martin Shops or Colby. I think there's too many houses and we need a few facilities among these houses.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Coop.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to what was mentioned earlier on about the crossings, and it surprised me there was nothing towards education. Presumably, any children that are living there, unless they go by car, would probably have to walk, which would be a long distance across some dangerous roads. So I would agree with Councillor Branson. Perhaps there should be some proper crossings put in there that are pedestrian controlled, not just take it in your life hands and rush across the road. So I would question that about lack of money for education.
Thank you. Is anybody else? Right, I can't see any hands, so we'll move on. Now, there are some people wishing to speak on this application. We have 2 people, Mr. Stuart Natkus and Mr. Andrew Mosley, applicants and agents for the developers. Now, as we all know, the applicant, the person that wishes to speak gets 5 minutes. But if there's more than one person speaking, they have to share that time. So what I really need to know from Mr. Stuart Natkus Is Mr. Andrew Mosley going to speak? I'm not bothered about him having to answer a question. That would come separately. But if he's going to make a statement like you are obviously going to do, then if you're both going to do it, then you're only going to get 2.5 minutes each. If you were going to do it on your own, then you get 5 minutes. So could Mr. Stewart Natkus, could you enlighten us on that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair, and apologies for not clarifying earlier.
That's okay, no problem.
It'll be myself that will speak. Mr. Mosley's a highways consultant who's acted for us and is here if any specific questions were to be asked of him.
That's fine. That's fine. So you've got 5 minutes, Mr. Natkus. You will be timed by our legal representative, and if you start to go over your time, she'll get angry with you. So go fire away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm Stuart Natkus on behalf of the applicant, the agent for this scheme. It's been a really interesting discussion actually so far, listening to the comments that have been made. And I want to reiterate a couple of the points that the office did in his very comprehensive report, and then hopefully allay some of the concerns that have been cited. As it was referenced, the site is an allocated housing site. It went through an awful lot of work for that allocation in terms of sustainability appraisal, infrastructure delivery, highways work, accessibility. For this site and cumulatively with others. And actually the plan in allocating it doesn't just justify houses on this site, but it actually proactively supports them and seeks to have them here to try and help deliver some of that infrastructure. And you can see that from the quite high levels of money that's going to be paid, particularly to highways and some of those junction improvements that this can bring forward to benefit the area. And with the allocation, the framework's quite clear that we should be looking to support sites on here, but obviously we have to make sure that they're acceptable and that the design's suitable and that they comply with all those policy requirements. And the plan quite clearly has individual allocations and identifies what should go on there. And here it's been highlighted that it looks to have 50 executive homes, which you would usually see as the larger, higher quality homes, 4 or 5 bedrooms. However, policy H1 does allow the deviation from that if it can be demonstrated in terms of design and other reasons. And since the adoption of the plan, there has been quite a change, which is that Martin West neighbourhood plan, which has identified something that wasn't really talked about when the plan was adopted, which is bungalows. And we almost have this dichotomy of the plan wanting large executive homes and the neighbourhood plan looking at smaller 2 and 3 bedroom bungalows. So what we've really tried to do is combine those two together. And I don't think we should look at them as competing interests and look at them as competing plans, but actually something that can draw together. So the scheme is 69 homes, but it's effectively policy H30 compliant with 50 executive homes. And for want of a better phrase, the non-compliant element of it is the 69 bungalows which have been included on the plan. But actually, I think that's a benefit because of the mix, the fact that they're integrated, the fact that it does give those varied street scenes, it gives the varied tenures, and it gives the opportunities for, different people, executive homes, bungalows, different residents to actually live together and integrate into form this community and mix with the others. So in terms of that, it was highlighted by the officers that we have to look at, is there any harm from those extra 19 units? And the two things that have been picked up have been design and highways. And in terms of highways, I understand the points about the access. Ultimately, for sight lines, the immediacy issues from the constraints with junctions opposite, the levels on site, the suds pond being at the front, the access position does get positioned centrally, and unfortunately you do lose those trees, as I think you mentioned yourself, Chair. There's 9 trees to be lost in total. However, there's another 100 trees to be planted on this site, so almost a 10-for-1 replacement in terms of what goes on to come forward and try and mitigate for that. And trees elsewhere, provided where they can be. So in terms of highways, the extra 19 units, we're looking at about 1 vehicle movement per hour. It's not a highway safety issue that's been identified. We've looked at the council's modelling. We've looked at that increase of 19 to see if it changes any of the work that was done at the allocation. And the highways officers have confirmed that it isn't, and Mr. Mosley's work has looked at that as well. So in terms of that, the 19 doesn't have specific harm. In terms of the design, does the 19 have it? And that was where the officer put this and framed it as a question to people. And we understand some of the comments that have been mentioned, but ultimately the site is still only 18 dwellings per hectares. It's a very, very low density scheme. We've aimed to have quite a landscape-led scheme. You can see that huge buffer at the front from the properties opposite to put those separation distances in place. There's 4 acres of open space on the site, which is about a third of the site provides for open space, excluding the suds pond, which itself will have that amenity value to it. We've kept as much of the landscape as possible. We've had a buffer. and we've kept this real green feel to the site with the spaces between the properties and those new trees to be included. In terms of the scheme itself, I say 18 dwellings per hectare, about half of what you'd normally expect on a housing site like this, a lot lower than what we've got nearby. And that ensures that we don't have any overlooking, we don't have any overdominance, we get varied street scenes, we get amenity levels, particularly on existing residents that are there. And I think what you can see from that comes from the fact that we did only get, I think, 4 objections were cited from the adjacent people. So I think, again, hopefully you'll see from that it is a well-designed scheme. We have put thought and effort to this. We've had various variations. We've worked really well with the officers to try and get a scheme that is policy compliant in terms of the 50 executive, but then also seeks to meet those aspirations of the neighbourhood plan in providing bungalows. That's where the changes come from what the council expected, but it doesn't have any adverse impact on design or highway safety or any of those other material considerations. And we hope you can support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
That's exactly 5 minutes. I was about to stop you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Natkus. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Natkus? Does anybody? Councillor Coop, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested in this. Did I hear right? Say 1 vehicle per hour? That's more like 1 vehicle per minute, surely. I've never known an estate anywhere with 1 vehicle per hour. Did I mishear you there?
No, apologies. It's as is in the officer's report, so it was me who misspoke. It is the level of traffic generation represents little under 1 vehicle movement per minute. Apologies.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I would misheard you there, because I'm sure going at that estate there. Yes. You've taken into account all the deliveries and the delivery vans and the Tesco's vans and things like that, because it's miles away from any shops. So I hope you've taken that into account. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? David Branson, did you have a hand up? No? Okay, so there's no more questions for Mr. Natkus. So we'll carry on now, and we do have an objector who wishes to speak, and this is Mr. John Sigmund. Are you with us, Mr. Sigmund?
Hello.
Hello, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Only just, you'll have to shout.
Yeah,
You've got 5 minutes, 5 minutes, Mr. Sigmund. Our legal officer will time you and stop you if you go over 5 minutes. So fire away, sir.
Well, I have 3 primary reasons to object to this application as it stands. And the first one is overdevelopment of the site, where the local plan refers to a maximum of 50 high-quality, high-value executive dwellings. And what's the purpose of the local plan referring to 50 dwellings when developers apply for 69? That's an increase of virtually 40%. Is it now suggested this development comprises low-quality, low-value dwellings? Because if it's granted for 69, this sends a clear message to other prospective developers. The planning officer report notes a shortfall in the separation of properties on the site by reference to the council's own urban design requirements. If a failure to comply with the council's own urban design requirements in terms of spacing doesn't indicate overdevelopment, then I don't know what does. But these are items which councillors will understand without needing to listen to me. As a resident of Brasscastle Lane, I want to focus on 2 aspects about which councillors may have slightly less understanding. The first is broadband, which I hope all councillors will agree is an essential service, especially when many people, including children and students, require to work and study from home and rely on online shopping. Broadband where I live is very poor and sometimes non-existent. It's been deteriorating month by month as new properties are completed and occupied closer to the BT cabinet on Dixon's Bank. I used to pay for fibre to the cabinet. This became unusable, and I was advised to downgrade to copper wire from the BT exchange. This is even slower, although marginally more reliable. It doesn't enable things to be done online, which most take for granted. City Fibre have announced a £42 million investment in fast broadband to nearly every home and business in Middlesbrough, but a check of their website reveals it doesn't include Brasscastle Lane. The planning officer report notes the developer is required to enter into discussion with internet providers to provide infrastructure for the application site. But this misses the point. The effect of the development on existing residents is not addressed. I wish to respectfully suggest a condition of the proposed development is the installation of a fibre optic cable the length of Brasscastle Lane, paid for by the developers. I don't believe the council would approve a new development if, for example, it prejudiced the water supply to existing properties. The same should apply for broadband. My final issue is traffic on Brasscastle Lane, which has grown and grown. Clearly, it has to be used to access properties on the lane, but it's heavily used as a cut-through. And this development will result in many additional vehicles using the lane for day-to-day access, in addition to which there will be extra traffic from deliveries and the visitors. The planning officer report refers to the effect as small. Even taking that as correct for each development in isolation totally overlooks the cumulative effect of all the recent developments. Individually, the effect may be small. Taking recent developments altogether, it's significant, and a line surely has to be drawn somewhere. Lockdown resulted in greatly increased use of the lane by cyclists and walkers, not just lycra-clad cyclists, but families with children. And pleasingly, this has been maintained to a significant extent. But it's become dangerous. Measures are required which greatly discourage through traffic, or ideally totally prevent it. And that's in addition to traffic calming measures to reduce vehicle speed along the whole of Brasscastle Lane. I've seen several near misses and have experienced more than one myself. The way things are now, a walker or cyclist is going to be killed or seriously injured. And so I respectfully suggest new development should be deferred until the road is made safer for all its users. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sigmund. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask Mr. Sigmund before we carry on? Nobody? Okay, we shall carry on. We now have a ward councillor to speak. Councillor Chris Hobson, are you available?
Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, officers, this development goes against the local plan and the Martin West neighbourhood plan. They both state a maximum of 50 houses. The Martin West neighbourhood plan supports 50 houses, but says this site should have at least 40% of the development built as bungalows. This is a way of partially meeting the chronic shortage of bungalows in South Middlesbrough. Neither the local plan nor the Martin West neighbourhood plan suggest it should be 50 houses plus bungalows. The advert for the sale of this land also stated a maximum of 50 dwellings, and it also states that planning permission will be granted for a high quality, high value executive residential development to provide a maximum of 50 dwellings and associated access improvements. That's in the land sale. We need a local plan to control development and to stop developers doing what they want. But we have to stick to numbers. That has been agreed. If we change numbers, what's the point of having a plan? The layout and design are very poor. There are 3 bungalows built near a mast. The spacing of the properties is very tight. The officer's report says that the spacing between the dwellings, the 14/21 metre distances, is not correct. But the officer is saying that's acceptable. It is not acceptable. Why have rules if we do not adhere to them? The officer's report again says policy H1 allows for numbers in the local plan to be changed. The policy says numbers can be changed only if the application is of very exceptional and outstanding quality. This development is neither. If this application is approved today, it will set a precedent for changing the planned developments all over the town. And sorry, this is wrong. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any members wish to ask anything of the councillor? No, so we'll move on. We now, unfortunately...
Chair, before we move on, there are a couple of points raised which I didn't cover in my presentation, which were raised during that. Can I...
Well, I did ask you, Paul, and you didn't stick your hand up, but yes, go ahead, of course.
I apologise for that, Chair.
Openness and fairness is what we try to achieve.
I apologise for that. Reference has been made a number of times about the 14 and 21 metre distance not being adhered to within this development. That only occurs in a couple of places within the scheme, and the distance which is where it is at fall short is only by matters of centimetres rather than metres, and it is in areas where it doesn't significantly impact upon amenity of the development. The other issue was made about broadband. I fully accept and hear the arguments made about that, but one of the problems that we have with broadband is that is delivered by a third party outside of the developer. I'm acutely aware that there are significant issues with broadband, and that as an authority we want to work with people to improve that. But unfortunately, some of the issues raised around broadband are not a planning consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Hobson, do you wish to go back on that? Are you okay?
That's fine, thank you.
Right. Anybody else got their hands up? No. No? Right, we do have another ward councillor who wishes to speak. It's Councillor John Hobson. In 2014, I sat in the Mandela room next to a man who I believe was a QC. He was sent from the government to inspect and agree to Middlesbrough local plan, which he did. This plan had already been to council and had already been agreed by full council. So to change the numbers of developments, how does that appear to be correct? It's not correct at all. We shouldn't be changing the numbers. The application today has, and I'll quote Paul on this, he said 35 objections. I didn't think it was as many as that, but I'm going to go with what Paul said, because Paul will be right. 35 objections from residents, 2 community councils, 1 parish council and 4 local councillors are all in disagreement with this plan. Going on to the traffic situation, the magic model has been used once again about this. And it's time, Simon, this model was put into retirement. People don't drive in bottom gear anymore. People speed all the time. The road to Brasscastle is what it says, a country lane. It was never designed for excessive traffic. At the western end, it joins Stokesley Road at the top of Dixon's Bank. Discussions are taking place to bring into alignment Gisborough Road and Brasscastle. They are at the moment a dogleg with each other. And I would request, by condition, that if this application is accepted, no work should be started until this road junction is resolved. Has anybody got anything they want to ask me on that? No? Right, so we now reach the stage where we go to the committee. Andy, would you like to read out the recommendations for the proposal so we know what we're fighting, please?
The recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions and subject to the Section 106, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Does anybody on the committee have any proposals to make? Councillor Garvey.
Wasn't a proposal, Chair. It was just I wanted to make a brief statement about the cars and the traffic. As you know, I have a problem accepting the program that's used for the amount of cars that development generates.
I can understand that.
And what I would say is that every time we have a development in this area, and it is in this area, we have to take into consideration the traffic on that development alone. But we keep getting developments in this area, and therefore, but we're not allowed to accumulate the developments and then have a look at the effect the traffic of all the developments is going to have on the area. We just have to consider the individual traffic elements, and I find that frustrating. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll go back to David. Did you want to say something? Are you going to make a proposal? Councillor Branson.
Yeah, I mean, although I agree that we should support development, I think that I agree with you, John, on a couple of key issues. The crossing at Brasscastle Lane is dangerous at the moment, and yes, I would like to see that junction made safe before we actually go forward with any development. The other thing that concerns me, and it's been mentioned by a number of people, is the amount of traffic. And I think that with the development of 69 houses, that's clearly going to be a problem. I mentioned about the crossing that there is over Brasscastle Lane. It's there because most people have to access schools on the other side of Dixon's Bank. There aren't any schools easily accessible for people there. So people have to cross Dixon's Bank. And then, of course, it has been very dangerous for people. We put the crossing in, but it just shows the difficulties of dealing with that. So I agree very much with your point, John, that we need that road junction resolving before we start looking at development. I don't know if that's a proposal, but certainly that's something I wanted to mention. And I think that probably we need to look at the numbers.
Right. Councillor Coop, you have a proposal?
Yes, Chair. Looking at this and thinking to all the arguments there, I'm not convinced that it meets the design criteria, quite honestly. I mean, it clearly states 50 including bungalows, not 50 excluding bungalows. And I do feel that this has got way above it. I've listened to all the arguments from everybody, have been put quite succinctly. And I would propose that on the design grounds, we reject this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Coop?
Chair,
Yeah.
just before that gets seconded, can I, obviously there's a motion there or a put forward there for refusal on design grounds, I think we just need to understand what those design grounds are essentially, because obviously
the
applicant would need to know what they are to either appeal or amend. Chair.
Yeah, okay. Right. Do we have a second for Councillor Coop's proposal?
Yeah. I'll second it, John.
I'll second it.
Right. Councillor Wilson. Right. Okay. So before we go to a vote, Councillor Cooper said that the design is poor. It is poor because, in effect, the Suds Pond is at the front of the road. The design of the access is cutting woodland in half. The design is enabling bungalows to be joined together as in tandem, when in actual fact there's nothing at all in Martin West that looks like that, apart from 2 old age pensioners blocks which are right down the south side. There's nothing up there at all. It is just a poor design. Does that satisfy you, Andy? You could also say it goes against Martin West neighbourhood plan, which I am in total agreement with. It does go against Martin West neighbourhood plan, which says 50 houses, 50 properties, and we've agreed with 50 properties. The Martin West neighbourhood plan has said that's what we would agree with, but that 50 had to include a certain amount of bungalows, and it just doesn't.
I would urge against not using the Martin West neighbourhood plan, Chair, in view that it's not a conclusive statement of number. Obviously, you've referred to bungalows, a terrace of bungalows there.
Yes.
To the removal of trees to get the access in, and the Suds Pond being at the front. I don't know.
The houses, Andy, are too close together. When you look at the map, they're in like, as I said to you the other day, they're in like matches in a box. They're far too close together. I know you said there's extra space. There is extra space in the land, but it's used up with planting trees and looking for greenfield areas. This, incidentally, is the last greenfield area the way we could actually do developing in Martin West. We have 2 parks, and apart from that, this is the only one of any size.
So I see 4 reasons, Chair, that members have put forward there. Then
okay, take them all, Andy.
Well, that's. Do you want me to just run through them before members vote, or are you happy with the members of?
I'll go through them again if you want. Right.
No, I'll just resume if you want. You've mentioned the suds at the front. You've mentioned the access, cutting the tree, the woodland.
Yeah. If you look back at, I keep saying your screen. It wasn't your screen. If you look back at the screen that Paul showed, it actually showed the width of Brasscastle Lane. Now, I was up there the other Sunday. I was there for a couple of hours, getting a feel for the place, looking at the land.
You're on mute, John. Chair, you've gone mute.
Still mute.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Right, I'll start again. Last Sunday, I went up there and had a look at the site, and I had a tape measure in my pocket. I measured the road, and it came to something like 7 meters. Now that's the only access in and out, the only designed access in and out. So what you're saying is that 59 properties are going to have probably 1.5 to 2 cars per head. They're all going to go in and out on that access road. The road itself was full of cars. My wife and I stood for quite some time watching them, and I didn't have a speedometer, but quite obviously, I believe everyone was speeding. At the end of the road, there's a sharp bend to the left and then a steep hill. At the right side to the road, which is the north side, we reached the crossing at Stokesay Road, which Councillor Branson referred to, which is a danger in itself. We've got 2 side roads going off. One goes down into Eagle Park, the other goes into the top of Eagle Park. It's all, traffic-wise, it's a nightmare.
I suppose I've got 4 reasons. I've made a note of 4 reasons that you've put forward there, Chair, before the vote. I think in terms of the highway stuff, I think there need to be a clarity on that you've just mentioned. In that, obviously, it's an allocated site, so
yes, it is. It is. I could totally agree with that.
If you've got concerns on highway grounds, I think that'd have to be above and beyond, the sort of policy issue. So
there is ways around the access point, but obviously that hasn't been taken into consideration. But that's fair enough. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. So, Councillor Cooper's proposed that we reject this application. It's been seconded by both Councillor Wilson and Councillor Platt. So we'll just go to a vote. Councillor Wilson, are you for or against the application?
Against the application, Chair.
Sorry, I've said that wrong. Are you for the application?
No, I'm against the application.
You're against the application, right. Councillor Garvey?
I'm against the application, Chair.
Councillor Branson?
I'm against the application, Chair.
Councillor Coop?
I'm against the application, Chair.
Councillor Platt?
Against.
And Councillor Hobson J, I'm against. So how does that work out, Georgina?
Chair, you haven't asked Councillor Dodds or Councillor Rostron.
Why do I keep missing you off? Councillor Dodds, sorry about that.
Too quiet. I'm the application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rostron. Can't hear you, Councillor.
I'm against, Chair.
Right. Sorry about that.
Chair, that's all 8 members have agreed to refuse the application.
Right. Application refused. Thank you very much. We'll now go on to agenda item. What are we up to now? Agenda item 6. This is the little pieces of things in the officer's report that we get that tell us which applications have been dealt with by officers and not by committee. Anybody got any comments on them? Anybody got anything in their ward that they wish to bring up with, I don't know whether it'll be Andy or Paul, but somebody. No? Okay, so we'll now go on to agenda item 7, which is the planning appeals. And I think we do have 1 or 2 this week. So, Andy, would you like to talk through them?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just bring them up on the screen for members. There's 4 appeals effectively that we thought were worth mentioning to members that raise certain issues or kind of worth a discussion. There are more, but they're not particularly significant, some of the other ones. So the first appeal, just bear with me. Right, sorry, Chair. That's I'm going to.
That's all right, Andy. We're okay.
And reshare a screen. That's not working for some reason.
We only have the 1 application today, so we're not in any rush.
Yeah.
I think Andy might be having issues with sharing his screen. Paul, have you got?
I'm just, yeah, sorry, I'd created a PDF, but for some reason some of the slides aren't on the PDF, so I'll upload your presentation proper.
Okay.
Give me 2 seconds. It's just.
I can open it to Andy if you want me to, the appeals presentation.
It is, it's opening up now as we speak.
Right.
It's taking a few seconds. For some reason. Right, here we go.
Paul, can I ask you, in this training program that we're shortly due to get, does that include appeals? Have you got something in for appeals?
We can include something, Chair. Yeah, not a problem. I think we need a further discussion in terms of what the training entails, because obviously there's only a certain amount we can get in a 1 session.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Are we likely to see it this year?
I don't know. We've only got a couple of weeks before Christmas. So what I still aim to get it before the next planning committee. I'll be discussing it with Andy later.
All right. Because if you want some help, you know, I mean, David and I will.
Absolutely. If I obviously catch up with you after this, probably on Monday with yourself and David.
You and I have a meeting on Monday, yes.
We do, yeah. Catch up at that point to discuss that and take that forward.
Right.
Okay, so it's loaded up now. I think hopefully members can see this. So the first appeal was in relation to a proposal at 75 Southwell Road. What members will see from the image is that the street was pretty much all semi-detached houses, and the proposal was for a 2-storey side extension and a single-storey rear extension. So you can see the house. I think it was that one that it referred to, but again, what members will see is very uniform sort of layout, all fairly traditional in appearance. Frontage is all largely intact as as original, and all hip roofs as well. And what a hip roof does is it creates a sort of wider open space at roof level, so you get sort of not necessarily views through, but it's a bit more open in the street scene. The application proposed was to put a side extension on the side all the way up to the boundary. And a lot of these come in with a hip roof, but this one, they were looking at going into the roof space as well. So they decided they wanted a gable roof on it, so squaring off the roof. And then on the rear, they were looking at a flat roof dormer, well, a dormer roof, not a dormer window. The whole roof would effectively become a built up with a big flat roof section on the rear. We refused it. We felt that the design and scale was really out of keeping with the character of that street scene, which was largely intact as original. And we also felt that the scheme itself had spare with me. There's a driveway down the side of these properties at the moment, and this was building over that driveway, and it was going to be effectively an open carport running through, so that they would essentially retain the driveway underneath. We felt that would be fairly narrow and result in it being quite difficult to sort of open a car door once you're down the side of the house, because they'd have to build a wall to support the upper floor and that would reduce that width. The inspector decided and concluded that they didn't have a particular issue with the car parking space, felt that there was enough space, or there wasn't enough evidence to suggest it couldn't be used as a space, but felt that there was significant harm to the character and appearance of the house property, and that appeal was dismissed. So that was the council decision was upheld effectively. The second of the appeals we've got, 42 Cinderwood. It was for a single-storey flat roof extension to the front of the property. We don't get many extensions for the front of the property, and this is a fairly unusual group of properties here in that we've got the property in the middle of the site, we've got a rear garden, which is a sort of private enclosed rear garden, and then we've got a front garden. But within the front garden, they've all got garages which are up against the roadside. So if I share images, we can see the image in the bottom left corner. So they've got garages. Behind the garage is a gap between the back of the garage and the house, and there's a kind of garden that then wraps around the rear of the garage and the side of the garage, forming the front garden. The proposal here is essentially to turn the garage into a bedroom, so do the internal works to sort that out, change the garage door to a solid door. Oh, sorry, actually, they were looking at leaving the garage door as part of the street scene, but they were looking at filling in the space behind. So you can see all this space in behind the garage was going to become a lobby and a bathroom and link to the downstairs bedroom. We refused it. I think it was one where officers, we weren't significantly against it. We didn't feel it significantly went against policy, but what it creates is an excessively long extension, around 10 metres to the front of the property. So the neighbouring property has essentially a 10-metre wall aside its front garden. It's a flat roof, so it ties in with the existing garage, and it runs in the same line as the existing garage. So arguably, it's in keeping with the house property in that sense. Inspector felt that it wouldn't be overly dominant and that it wouldn't be detrimental to the character of the area. I think importantly, if ever anyone sort of demolishes garages along here, then if a 10-metre extension to the front of one of these properties is left in place, then obviously it starts to look very odd. So it was a bit of a difficult one, really. I think really down to mainly the nature of the existing on the plot, but that's something that we will no doubt get replicated on other sites that are almost identical to that, I think. We've got the third one, 6 Malvern Drive. This is the old sort of 1930s semi-stock in Middlesbrough. It's a proposed 2-storey extension to the side, and that extended beyond the rear elevation into the rear garden. What we can see there is it's not unduly wide as an extension on the side. It's set back from the front elevation. So this is the front elevation of the main house. This is set back. And the roof line is lower than the main house. So that main house envelope keeps its frontage intact and the roof intact. And that's something we try and aim for when we're looking at side extensions. So it meets our policy requirements on that. What it did do, though, is it went back quite a long way. And if you can just see that yellow line on the screen, members, that's the roughly the existing rear boundary line of the 2-storey element of the house. So it's going back sort of considerably further. Think about 10.5 metres in total. And officers felt it was probably a little bit too much. We were kind of pushing for another, I think, metre, maybe a little bit more to be taken off the length. The applicant didn't want to do that. Obviously, it would compromise internal space, and it ended up at appeal. We refused it. It ended up at appeal. The inspector felt that the extension, it was a sympathetic design. It had a hip roof, and it sort of would fit with the street layout, and felt that long side elevation probably in this instance wouldn't be overly dominant. It wasn't particularly visible because of the position of the adjacent property. And actually the adjacent property had an approved scheme which would have also extended that property slightly to the rear and to the side. So I think that was taken into account to some extent. And this is an interesting one. This final one, Chair. It's a bit of an unusual appeal in that Officers approved the scheme, and it was an appeal against one of the conditions that we imposed on the application. So this is in Linthorpe, it's in the conservation area, and you can probably get that feeling from the style of the property. It was for effectively the demolition of this single-story section to the side of the property, and for essentially its replacement with a new annex. The application, so that's the as existing, so that's the front view, that's what's there at the moment, and this is at the side. It's a sort of bit of a mishmash of buildings and roof levels and the like. Originally was submitted, is how the application was submitted for this annex, and what members will probably appreciate is that the existing house property's got a very vertical emphasis to everything. It's got steps up to the front door, the windows, the roof, the chimneys, everything is a vertical emphasis, even the width versus the height of the property. And the proposed extension is very much horizontal in nature. All those proportions tend to be horizontal. And when we look at the side elevation, we've got a very shallow and long roof slope, which is entirely out of keeping with that existing roof, which is short and steep. So through changes, we as officers weren't happy to accept this. Through changes, we ended up approving this scheme, which reduced the width of the extension and got it more back to a sort of traditional design, if you like. If you look at the side elevation, a much more appropriate roof pitch and depth with a parapet flat roof on the rear. It's still wide, and I think, if there'd have been no existing extension there to start off with, I don't think we'd have been supporting this width. We would have been looking for a narrower extension, but because what was already there, we were that already kind of set the principle, if you like. This was approved, but one of the conditions said that all the windows need to be timber windows, which is what we normally do in the conservation area when it's visible. I feel it's important to retain that traditional material, and the traditional style of, in this instance, would be a sliding sash window. With the conservation policies, the conservation policies require new development to either enhance or sort of have a neutral impact, but not worsen the character or negatively affect the character of the conservation area. And what the inspector felt with this is that because of the positive aspects that we got the application to, the actual building itself, the scale of it, the form, the appearance, and the design of it, felt that that was an actually improvement over the existing side extension that's on that property at the moment, and felt that as a whole, allowing this to have UPVC windows would still mean that it would comply with the conservation area policy, and that it would still be enhancing above what is there at the moment. So again, that's one for us to bear in mind. Again, they've got a starting point, and that's important when we look at development, because that sets the principle of what our sort of benchmark is, if you like. We can't continually improve things by significant amounts if there's only a policy requirement to either have a neutral effect or an enhancing effect. So but the applicant was willing to come so far with it, but the timber windows obviously want to challenge that, and he's been successful on appeal on that one, Chair. So that's it really on the appeals.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Andy about this? No. We've come to the end of the meeting really, but we have really one sort of matter of urgency. I'll have to ask Georgina. Is this our last planning meeting this year, Georgina?
Yes, it is, Chair.
Right. Okay.
The next meeting scheduled for Friday, the 15th of January.
Right. Thank you very much. So, if members remember all those mince pies that I brought last year, I'll have to eat them all myself this year, won't I? Because I can't see anybody. Anyway, I would like to wish you all the compliments of the season. Happy Christmas. Thanks for turning up at all the meetings. Thanks for all the decisions you've made. And let's hope that next year is a better year than this. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.